to the end by applying the differences in times to the calculated time for 1162-2. But he does do the math, which I'll show, for the differences on these phone calls.
In terms of Dr. Welcher's report, did he identify a GPS point of 154 at all?
Yes.
How did he describe that GPS data point?
He describes in his initial PowerPoint slides as point 154 aligning with the end of vehicle event 1162-1, talking about a different event now. This is the 3-point turn event. So he uses that as an anchor point.
And that anchor point, you said, was the end of the text stream event, or the end of the recording of that text stream event.
Correct. The Aperture reports consistently reference everything from the end of the events.
Let's go to slide 9, please. What are we looking at here?
On the left is an excerpt of page 33 from Mr. Burgess's initial report. And what he shows here is he has identified 7 call logs that exist both in the infotainment from Ms. Reed's Lexus and in Mr. O'Keefe's phone. He puts them in a table form. Then he actually goes on and calculates the difference between those 2 times. So that's what I meant by he sort of does the math. He makes my job a little easier, and the numbers are already there. He just never applies these to any of the times. So that's where I step in and say, if I take that 3rd column that he lays out, those are in seconds. If I apply those seconds, that adjustment to 12:31:43, where do we end up with John's interaction window in those times?
What did you conclude in terms of finishing the work?
Sure. I did all of them. And so I highlight on this particular slide, I just highlighted the very first one he has in here. In that case, he identified that Mr. O'Keefe's phone was 2 seconds slow relative to the infotainment system. So if we apply only that adjustment, then John's interaction window becomes positive 28 seconds.
Did Mr. Burgess apply all of the potential offsets?
He didn't apply any of the offsets. He calculated all of them, but he didn't apply any of them.
Did you ultimately apply all of the offsets?
Yes, I did.
And what did you determine?
Regardless of which offset you apply, John's interaction window remains positive. The number changes, but it remains positive.
Let's take a look at those one at a time if we can. Let's have the next slide.
So on this slide, I just took the other end of the spectrum. There's a large range in values in this table. He doesn't actually, Mr. Burgess doesn't show the sign conventions on here, but actually—
What do you mean sign conventions?
Sign conventions, he doesn't show when he calculates the difference whether it's positive or negative. All the numbers in the table don't have a sign, don't have a plus or minus in front of them, but there's an implication. Some of them are plus, some of them are minus. So the first one that we just looked at showed we had 2 seconds slow. There's another value in here that's on the other end of that. It shows that Mr. O'Keefe's phone is 21 seconds fast now relative to the infotainment. So that's the largest value in the table we could take that would bring John's interaction window down now. And so if we apply just that adjustment, John's interaction window becomes a positive 5.
Take a look at slide 11, if we could, please. What are we looking at here?
So I've shifted now from the phone calls, and now we're going to talk about the 3-point turn alignment. And the 3-point turn alignment is first presented in Dr. Welcher's slide from his presentation here. And in this, he doesn't say it explicitly, but he provides some math on the screen, which is a little hard to read. But he puts some math on the screen that shows he's aligning this point 154 from Mr. O'Keefe's phone to the end of event 1162-1. This is the prior event. This is a 3-point turn. And so he aligns, he says this is basically how you align it, and he doesn't do the math. Again, he lays out that he says a 19.2 second difference. I actually just adjusted that to 20, which is the most conservative way to interpret that. I don't think we have the accuracy here to talk about tenths of a second. Nevertheless, I just rounded that up to 20, and when we apply that 20 seconds to our event 1162-2, then John's interaction window becomes +6. That's just applying this. We're not combining anything. We're just applying the difference shown in this slide.
And that positive interaction window, is that calculated based on information directly from Dr. Welch's report?
Yes.
Let's go to slide 12. What are we looking at here? What is this table?
This is a table I made. We've talked about a lot of different approaches to how these clocks can be aligned and a lot of different variables. So I tried to summarize them in one table, put them all together, because some of them we can combine. We can combine the key on with either a phone call or a 3-point turn, but we can't combine, for example, a 3-point turn and a phone call. That's not valid. So I put all the possible combinations, all of them, with, without key switch, phone calls, and .154 on one table, and I calculated John's interaction window for all valid combinations from the aperture reports. And when we do that, the result is that regardless of what adjustment we make, all of the numbers are positive, meaning regardless of what adjustment we make, the phone lock event always occurs after the end of event 1162-2.
Did Mr. Burgess, in your review of his report in January of 2025, did he ever undertake all possible offset calculations?
No.
In his May 2025 report, did he undertake all possible offset calculations?
No.
What is your opinion in terms of best practices regarding calculations of this sort?
I think if there's sufficient data, if there's testing or research or literature that in a specific case supports there is a best path or a best method, then we should use that. In this case, I don't think there is a best practice. There isn't any literature I'm aware of that would specify exactly the best path to align all of these. So in the absence of any external data to support one path, the most valid approach is look at all of them as a whole and then draw the conclusion from the totality of that data, rather than cherry picking a single point.
Can you testify to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether all potential offsets that were described in Aperture's original report, January of 2025, result in a positive interaction window?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
Regardless of what adjustment or combination of adjustments we make from the original reports, John's interaction window remains positive.
Does the positive interaction window mean the lock event occurred after or before the text stream event?
It means the lock event occurs after the end of the text stream event, 1162-2.
You've already indicated that you received a second report, May of 2025, correct?
That's correct.
In that report, is there the same clock skew alignment or a different clock skew alignment that Mr. Burgess now undertakes?
Mr. Burgess undertakes a different alignment in that report.
Let's go to slide 13. Describe what we're looking at in this slide.
So what I have here on the left is a screenshot of page 42 from Mr. Burgess's supplemental report. And so now he's done two things new here. He's identified a new method for aligning the data based on the 3-point turn. So now he's kind of following where Dr. Welcher started, but he's approaching it a little differently. And secondly, he is now calculating the actual time. He's doing the difference calculation, and he's applying that to the time. So now he's taking the calculation all the way through, which is a little different from the prior reports. And so when he does that, he makes my job really easy because I didn't have to do really any math now. He comes up that there is a range now. So prior to this point, the original report by Mr. Burgess and Dr. Welcher reports all used discrete points in time, right? They sought to find an event that occurs at a singular second and another event at a singular second and a line based on that. This is a little bit of a departure from that approach. Mr. Burgess is now using a range of times, a range of uncertainty. He basically assesses that the 3-point turn data from the phone and the 3-point turn data in 1162-1 cannot be precisely aligned down to a single point. Rather, they overlap in this range of seconds. And so he then says that that range must be applied. So now we have to apply a range. And what we end up with is 9 possible values. So it kind of looks like one conclusion, but really there's 9 conclusions on this slide. And so if we just applying the math he has in the supplemental report, John's interaction window now has a range of 9 possible values. And that range spans from +5 now to -3. So we have 5 positive values. We have 1 value that's 0, and the 0 would mean it's simultaneous. And then we have 3 negative values.
Does Mr. Burgess indicate in his report that any one of those values is more likely than any of the other values?
He does not provide any data or analysis to support 1 point being preferential over the other 8.
And are there more or fewer positive results in his analysis than negative?
There are more positive numbers in that range of 9 than there are negative numbers.
Does Mr. Burgess's new data indicate anything about Dr. Welcher's analysis about the GPS data point 154 being at the end of the 3-point turn?
He opines in that aligning the 3-point turn on a singular point is not, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't know the exact way he states it, but not the preferred method.
Is Mr. Burgess's analysis consistent or inconsistent with Mr. Welcher's determination that GPS point 154 was at the end of the text stream event?
Objection.
Sustained.
Does Mr. Burgess, in his report, indicate whether he agrees or disagrees with Dr. Welcher's analysis?
I don't remember specifically.
In your opinion, I asked you about Mr. Burgess's report. Now I'm going to ask you about your opinion. In your opinion, is this new offset any more likely or reasonable than any other offsets previously proposed by Mr. Burgess?
I don't think it is more or less likely. I think it is a valid approach, certainly. And so I think the results from the additional analysis should be included with the analysis of all of the results so far.
And none of those results are more or less likely than any of the others, correct?
Sustained.
Are any of the results, in your opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, are any of the results any more or less likely than any of the others?
It's my opinion they're all equally weighted.
Did Mr. Burgess account for the 3-second offset that we talked about earlier in his May 2025 report, his new report?
I did not see any mention of that in his supplemental report, and certainly the 3 seconds isn't present in his math. I don't see it there.
Let's go on to slide 14, please. Describe what we're looking at here in this table.
This is very similar to the table we looked at previously, where I look at all possible combinations. Now, however, I just have a lot more data points to show, so I've had to break the table into two tables. So we're going to look at this, and then we'll look at slide 15 next, which is the second table. I just couldn't cram 30 lines onto one slide.
Let's move to the next slide then. Is this a continuation of the
second half? So think of these as a singular table. I just had to split them up. If we head back to slide 14, we'll start there. So this slide, I'm not accounting for the key on, and that's the main difference between my two tables. Table 1, I'm not accounting for the 3-second key on. In table 2, I am.
When you say key on, you're talking about that 3-second delay.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
But again, I want to make sure we're thinking about this as a singular table because that's where we'll draw our conclusions from. So the first lines of the table, we've already seen those. Those were in my original table. I haven't changed those. That's the same math that's been there. All I did was I added the 9 points now from Mr. Burgess's supplemental report using the range he shows. And so now we can see if we include that, now we get some positive numbers for John's interaction window. We get that 0. And again, the 0 would imply that the end of event 1162-2 is happening exactly at the same second as the phone lock. So it's kind of not on one side or the other. So I think it should be thought of as separate. And then we have 3 negative values, which would imply that phone lock occurs before the end of 1162-2.
And did you already mention the simultaneous, the one that was simultaneous?
When John's interaction window is 0, correct.
0.
That would imply simultaneity.
All right, is this 14 or 15? This 14, let's move to 15. Now, this is the continuation of that. Mentally, we'll just continue that same table?
Correct.
Okay.
Just a continuation. Imagine in your mind is just rows 16 to 30.
Okay.
And it's the same thing, same format, except for now we're just adding in that key on adjustment because, again, I think the analysis should be run with and without it. And so now when we run this with the key on adjustment, we get 14 of these 15 are John's interaction window is positive to various degrees, and one of them, it's 0, again, simultaneous, and there are no negative values with this adjustment.
Can we go to the next slide, 16, please? What are we looking at here?
This is the summary, then, of that table, kind of a verbal summary of the giant 30-line table now. And if we look at all of the possibilities from all of the Aperture reports collectively, then we can draw some pretty straightforward conclusions. 25 of those 30 possibilities result in interaction with the O'Keefe phone after the end of event 1162-2. Looking at all the possibilities, 2 of the 30 result in interaction where it's simultaneous. That's the zeros. They're present in both tables. And then looking at all 30, 3 of the 30 result in interaction with the phone before the end of event 1162-2.
Do you have an opinion as to which of these particular offsets that you've described, these 30 possibilities, should be applied in this case?
No.
Why is that?
Each of the approaches have their own individual strengths, and each of them have their own individual weaknesses. And there is not really any published literature, any research, or any testing done that I'm aware of that would suggest one really stands head and shoulders above another one of the methods. So I think the most fair way to present it is to look at, again, if we combine everything together, then we can draw some conclusions like this in terms of how many of the total result in one outcome or another.
Is every data point that we're looking at and that you've been talking about, are these all drawn directly from Aperture's reports?
That's correct. I have not proposed any methods for aligning the clocks myself. All of the methods that comprise these 30 are from the Aperture reports themselves.
Based on your analysis of the Aperture, or your review of the Aperture analysis, Is there any ability to say to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that the text stream event occurred after the last physical interaction with John O'Keefe's phone?
Yes, there would be three out of the 30 possibilities would result in that.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that it did happen after the text stream event?
Objection.
Sustained.
Of the 30, what's the percentage of possible events that occurred, possible scenarios, I should say, wherein the text stream event occurred after the last interaction with John's phone? What's the percentage?
That's sustained.
You said it's 3 out of 30, correct?
Yes,
Is that 10%?
that is 10%.
Objection. Move to strike.
Yeah, it's sustained and a move, it's stricken.
What percentage is 3? Just do basic math for me. What is the percentage between 3 and 30?
Objection.
Sustained.
If I told you hypothetically,
Objection.
I'm going to see you type out for a second.
Following your analysis of the totality of the possible scenarios, did you come to a conclusion that the vast majority, let me rephrase that, did you come to any conclusion about the numbers as they relate to the positive interactions versus the negative? And when I say positive versus negative, I'm talking about the phraseology that you used. John's phone interaction being in the positive side versus John's phone interaction being in the negative side.
Yes.
And what were those?
Of the 30 possibilities, 25 of them, it's a positive. John's interaction window is positive for 25 of them.
And only 3 were negative?
Correct. Only 3 of the 30 were negative.
Okay, we can take that slide down. Is there a data recorder on the Toyota SUV that we've been talking about, that 2021 Toyota SUV 570, that's designed to record impact?
Yes.
What is that? What is that mechanism?
That would be the airbag control module,
The ACM?
ACM.
Did you look at that?
I was provided a copy of the download from the ACM.
What did the data recorder indicate, if anything, related to any impact on January 29th, 2022?
There were no recorded events whatsoever on the ACM.
Did the vehicle control history record whether there was any history of a collision on that car, ever?
No.
What does the vehicle control history record specifically?
It records a lot of operational parameters about the vehicle. What I mean by that is it records things like what the driver is doing, for example, steering wheel angle, accelerator pedal position, whether the brake is being pressed. It also records what the vehicle is doing, for example, speed, or the engine RPM, or the accelerations of it.
Does the TechStream data event indicate that there's a, and I'm talking about very specifically the TechStream data, does that indicate whether or not there's a collision in the car?
No.
Does the TechStream data event mean that if you find a TechStream data event or a trigger event, does that mean that the airbags are deployed?
No.
Does it mean that the vehicle impacted with something solid?
No.
Does it mean that the vehicle impacted with a pedestrian?
No.
You reviewed the raw TechStream data associated with the entirety of Ms. Reed's vehicle, did you not?
Yes.
How many TechStream events or triggers were found on Ms. Reed's vehicle during the course of the 8-month period prior to January 29th?
Objection.
So can you narrow that, Mr. Jackson?
Sure.
I object to the whole line if I could.
And I need to see it, typo. Mr. Jackson, how much longer? I'm just trying to figure out.
I'm wrapping it up, Judge.
Okay.
It's not going to be long. A few more questions.
I'm not curbing you in any way. We just.
No, understand. Respectfully, it won't be very much longer. You reviewed the tech stream data, otherwise known as the triggers, for the entirety of Ms. Reed's vehicle, correct?
Yes.
How many trigger events did you find in the life of the car?
Not counting 1162-2.
Let's stop there. Right.
Prior to 1162-2, there were 19 prior events.
And 19 total events, correct?
Correct.
And how many collisions were clocked by any recorder on that car?
None of the events were triggered by a collision.
And last question, do any of the tech stream events or do any of the data that you've reviewed, either yourself through Mr. Burgess's report, through Dr. Welch's report, do any of the data indicate that there was a collision on January 29th, 2022 at any time?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
What did you find in terms of, I want to narrow this question to January 29th, 2022. What did you find in terms of any data regarding a collision?
Neither of the events that occurred on that date were triggered by a collision.
Thank you. May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Okay.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Jurors, we're going to take the morning recess. There's some things that we need to do with the lawyers. That we'll have you come back at 12.
Question, jury.
Can I see counsel at sidebar to save us some time, please?